Okay, I think we are live now. Let me know if you can hear this and this all sounds okay. I did have an issue with my mic right before going live here because I was switching between having it on like Discord versus here for a call. So if I sound okay, let me know. But I'm getting everything pulled up, and I think we should be pretty good to jump into things. Let's see. Trying to pull it up on my phone so I can see if I can tell it all. Okay, it's not too far behind. Okay, I think we're good. Okay. Okay, sweet, 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 sweet. Okay, so let's do this real quick. All right, here we go. Hello, Michelle. Hello again. I think I'm getting all this pulled up correctly. All right. Okay, I think I think we're pretty set to go. Hello, Kyle. And I'm just like trying to remember if I posted everything everywhere beforehand. I think I did. I think we're all good. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's get moving. Oh wait. We'll do that. Hello. Okay, so first, for anyone that pops in, if you're in the US Southeast Coast area and are bracing for the storm, I hope you all stay safe. It's definitely looking like it's gonna be a bit of a doozy. We're all prepared over here. It shouldn't reach us until like Saturday night, but I'm not too worried about it. Like we have like solar panels and stuff. We're fine. But so today we are going to be doing a little bit of Pillar World Spec Bio, which is very exciting. I haven't done very much of this on the chat here. Oh wait, did this not work? Hold on one second. Something. Ooh, okay, give me 1 second actually. Let me pull this up. It was supposed to have posted, but for some reason, no, that's not what I wanted. It didn't post. So let me copy the link over real quick. Hello, George. Okay. I'm so bad with Discord sometimes, to be honest. Why did that switch to someone else's Discord that's not my Discord? At everyone. And then this link. Boom. Okay, there. That should work. Yeah, okay, cool. Now I've officially posted and I've done my due diligence. All right, so yes, this is essentially what we're going to be working on today, what I do in my patron-only weekly live streams, usually. So a lot of the like pre-cool work building up to where we're going to be during this is not going to be available on YouTube. That's all on the patron-only side, accessible through Discord or whatever. But we are going to be working on a piece that's kind of self-contained. So this is still going to be good. If you haven't like watched all that, if you're not a patron, that's fine. That's why we're doing this publicly. It's going to be a good time. Now, if you did see the Spec Bio work that we did during the World Building Festival, I did have a couple of streams with Bib to get started on this. But essentially, Pillar World is dominated by an entire ecosystem of dragons. So big shout out to Bib for getting me started and his continued advice and support helping me out with all this. But today we're going to work on Dragons of the Savanna. So let me pull up. I think this is my Notion layout. Yeah, okay. So we have a couple things to get out of the way really quickly. First, a couple of important things to note for people that haven't seen this yet, which, hello, our Knight Petrichor. For people who haven't seen any of this stuff before, this is the like important bits that we can come back to, or you all can feel free to throw it in the chat if someone pops in and doesn't know it. But the first thing is that our biomes are a little bit different than Earth. We're essentially working with like a bunch of sky islands, so they're a little different, but we're not going to run into much weirdness with the savanna. Second, these biomes are going to be a little smaller, so the range, like I could see our largest grassland savanna maybe being the size of like a quarter the size of Ireland, maybe tops. Like these are going to be small, not the huge expansive grasslands we might see on Earth, because there is not huge expanse of land here at all, right? And everything we're going to be looking at is mostly in the tropics, but just higher up. So let's see. And the last note I have is that our dragons are not magical. They are essentially evolved almost like pterosaur cousins, I guess, but more dragon-esque is the idea. Okay, so let me pull up my Savanna notes, or actually, these are some doodles just to see real quick. I don't know. The top one Bib did, the bottom one is one of the sketches I was doing. But we have a lot of stuff in here that we may have to come back and reference. So like we have some cladogram sketches, we have all of our clades, like we have a ton of random information in here that we might have to come back and look at. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen and share a different tab. Here we go, specifically for the Savanna. So the way this is going to work and the way we did this last time is we essentially did, we just kind of went through and we're like, okay, what are all the little like niches that we want to fill in the Savanna that a dragon would fill that niche for, which in our world, mostly dragons are going to fill all the niches other than a few small things. Like there's still insects. There's going to be a few other animals that aren't dragons that are still around. But for the most part, you know, all dragons. And we can do this by thinking about like specific animals we know in these biomes and trying to figure out like what the equivalent would be for like a dragon. That's all good. So to prepare for this, I have pulled up our little sketch that we drew of some of the plants that we're going to have in our savannas. They are different than what we have in Earth Savanna, but they fill very similar roles. So I'm not sure it's super duper relevant. We have special like berry grasses. There are no angiosperms on Pillar World. They're all gymnosperms, essentially. But they still have evolved to have, like, sort of like what we would think of as, like, berries and, like, grasses, even though they're not actually. And then we have some trees. So grasses, trees, that's all you really need. And I made some notes here to kind of get us started. But I think the big two things that we're going to have to think about here to get us started is that it is a very water stressed system. So figuring out how the dragons will handle that, given that like some of them can fly, certainly makes things easier. No idea what amniosperms and gymnosperms are. So like gymnosperms are like, I mean, juniper trees, conifer trees, cycads, stuff like that. Okay, hold on. Let me look up a good definition for that, because I feel like if I were to explain it, it would take like 20 minutes. But it's basically anything that's like a seeding, fruiting plant is an amniosperm for the most part. Yeah, that's the word, flowering. Yes, they have flowers. They have flowers, and then they also can make fruits. So anything like wheats that we have, like grains, those are all angiosperms on Earth, all that kind of stuff. Not that there won't be flowers. There's more details in there on how they reproduce. But yes, flowers, fruits are the main thing. We will still have those things to an extent, but like if you were a botanist, you would know that they're different, but like most people probably won't know that they're different. Kind of vibe. Like, yeah, that's kind of the idea. Yeah. So where was I saying? Oh yeah, water stress system, right? Because it's Savanna, right? So we're gonna have some like dry seasons. So we're gonna have a lot of like grazers that are dealing with that sort of thing. We're not gonna have a big like forested area, so our boreal dragons are probably gonna not really be as much of a thing here. And then the other thing is that, and you see this a lot on Earth, right? You tend to get a lot of super big herbivores that like migrate around, think like elephants and stuff like that. And then those can then sustain a lot of predators. But we're going to have a little bit of a different situation here, right? Given that these areas are smaller and also things can fly here. So it's a little bit, not that things, you know what I mean? Most things can or could fly here. And yeah, so that's kind of the notes we're starting with. So I have pulled in for reference our little clades so we can figure out where the dragons come from, but don't worry about that if you're like throwing out suggestions. Do you all have an idea of where you want to start? Because I think a good starting place would either be with, ecosystem. There's going to be stuff like termites and other small insects to break down things. That's something you see a lot in Savanna. So we could start with things that eat those, or we could probably start with like grazers and what the grazers would kind of look like from a dragon perspective, if anyone has a preference there. It's always hard with the lag. Trying to wait for the opinions, then it's like if people don't have opinions. I feel like it's always helpful if I can. Let's see. Grazers would be my slight preference. Okay. We will go with that. All right, so grazers. So grazers. These are going to fill a similar role to giant herbivores. And I think to an extent, we could still have some larger flightless herbivores. But I could definitely see a lot of these being smaller, right? Because they're not going to have huge territories. So like the savanna is not going to be able to support that many large animals. So let's start, let's just add in a basic, it'll be a grazer. We'll come back around with that. Let's see. Most likely, I would probably expect the grazers to not be flighted unless it was like maybe also like an omnivore where they ate multiple things and they're just like an opportunity grazer. Like I could see that, but I just don't see just like eating the grass, especially in an ecosystem like this where it's going to be harder to find, that they'd be able to support being larger and having a lot of flight. So my thought is we either go with like short distance flighted, like they usually don't fly, but they can fly, or flightless entirely. Let's stick short distance flighted in there to start. Yes, exactly. Flying animals typically need to eat higher nutrient foods. Yeah, exactly. So you tend to see like for the most part, a lot of our flying dragons are still going to be predators or omnivores. Not exclusively, but yeah, we'll definitely tend to see that. So do I have grazers specifically in here? We'll just throw herbivores in. And then for size, I don't think we're going to get elephant size. Like, I really don't think that would happen. But I think we could get like mastiff sized, right? That kind of large category. I could see that. It's a little harder. We might need to make a smaller version of them too. That might be a little bit more populated. Antelope size makes sense. Yeah, that's sort of a look. So where do I have? Yeah, okay. So we'd probably still expect these to be somewhat migratory, so semi-migratory. We'd probably expect these to move around in herds, both for like safety, because it's going to be kind of rough for these guys, to be honest, right? Because if you think of like the savanna, right? The savanna that we normally think of. When you have your big predators, you're thinking like your lions, for example, your cheetahs. The way you escape them is you run from them and then you hope that they only pick out like the weak or the sick or, from the herd. But you can't really like run as easily when you're dealing with giant flying predators. Like it's a little bit different. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, Kyle, they would probably definitely be smaller. And part of that is how much we're considering the limitation of their like ecosystems, right? Because if they fly, their territories can be longer and the effect is less so. So if we were to go, like maybe we'll make another version of this once we get this one figured out that is fully flightless and would be a little smaller probably. And I think that would probably make a lot of sense there. But I'm wondering if we want these to have some sort of defensive adaptations that aren't just they can run, because if you're being chased by large flying dragons, how much is running really going to help you, right? If they were flightless, oh, that's true. That's true. If they were flightless, they could get larger. Yeah, we could go either way with that, honestly. Let's deal with those once we get over to them. Would borrowing? Do you mean burrowing? Would burrowing be an option? I could definitely see there being some smaller burrowing animals. Like that would be a really good way for them to avoid the flying dragons. So let's add a little entry now, just so we have it. But like burrowing, yeah, burrowing, and then their defense is burrow to hide from predators. Okay. So actually, Miles, we do have basis already in our cladogram for like acid spitting dragons. So we can add some acid spitting dragons here. We can do that. Is this obsidian? No, this is actually Notion. So let's add that. Miles wants some acid spitters, which we can pull those in. Do I have? Yeah, our catalyst venom spitters. So we'll add those in there. But yeah, let's go back up to the grazers real quick. I think we could still have ones that run. If we're going to have herd animals like this, you're going to expect them to have larger, like, they're going to need to replace their population faster because it's going to be harder for them to protect from predators and fight off predators. Yes, size can be a defense against flying predators too. They can make them harder to lift away and put the predators in danger. Yes. So what we can probably do is we can say they have retained a decent amount of, probably not teeth, right? Because they're going to want teeth optimized for grazing and chewing grasses and stuff. But we can say they keep their claws for group retaliation. Maybe not fully like kangaroo style, but you know, where they defend the herd versus more so than running. Defend the herd more than running. And then that could help justify them being this size. And also they would be able to run away to an extent from flying because they would be able to fly slightly for these ones at least. So let's figure out where they're gonna come from, because these would be in our scrolling. We have like a vegetarian track. A vegetarian, that's great. Herbivores, we have our armored flying herbivores, and then we have our woolly haired herbivores. We could go either direction. Hello, Machiko. So the question is, I think with what we've talked about, they don't really need to be armored. These could be armored. They could come from that track. Well, so the water's going to be a bit of a problem there because it's not really like they're up in the sky. So the whole pillar world concept is that they're essentially sky islands, and nothing below like 1,000 meters is accessible because there's like deadly fog. So essentially, there's no coast, there's no ocean, there is just cliffs and death. Yes. Thinking like rams and bison just straight up brushing. Yeah. I feel like that's probably a pretty good example. So more like ram / bison kind of vibe. I do like that. A miles into the air. Yeah. No worries. So does anyone have a thought here if we should go armored? Because these could be like armored or semi-armored, or we could go with the furry fuzzy track. Woolly haired. Oh wait, no, those are the colder climate ones. So probably not those. So I mean, they're still an outgroup, so they could just be like your basic herbivore. They could be early armored flyers, essentially, is probably what if we went that route, it would be so. Which will produce cuter drawings. I think the early armored flyers has some fun options there because we can just have part of them be armored, right? Just a little bit. And I think that would work pretty well. They'd be pretty cute. And you could have like little, like, not like crests, because I do not want to do crests because I don't want these to actually look like pterosaurs. But they could have other sorts of, you know, display features or, you know, protection features, that sort of thing. Pangolin potential. I want pangolin dragons. It's gonna happen. Okay, yeah, so we have those. The thing that I was thinking about before, and that I'm not sure how we want to address this, nesting. Because a lot of what you'll see with these kinds of herd animals on Earth, right, is that they tend to just, like, sleep, like, I can't remember what the word is, but, like, they migrate around and, like, they kind of just, like, some of them lay down and they sleep and just where they are, right? They don't really have nests to the same way, and when they have their young come out basically able to move around, right? Whereas with our dragons, they are going to be a little bit more helpless. Now, that's not to say that we can't go slightly more kangaroo-like and have them, like, you know, they could, like, ride on the back of their parents or stuff like that. Like, we could go that route to keep them moving, but we do have a lot more of a K-type? Is that what is the R-type versus K-type thing? Where they spend more time with their young and tend to put more effort into their young, although these could be, I don't know. But it makes the nesting dilemma a little bit interesting. Because we could still try to have the, like, standing or migratory temporary nests. Like, that's the closest to what they have, like, on Earth, unless anyone has an idea. I think that's K-type. Yeah. Yeah. Also, hello, Lands Unknown. Shout out Lands Unknown. Doing fun stuff on Sundays. Yeah, on Sundays. And also, while we're at it, Miles has a booba with Let's Have a Booba on Tuesdays. It's a whole fun time for conlanging. Okay, so I think that kind of sums us up. If we are going with the early armored flyers, these are going to be semi-armored, but also fuzzy. So they're going to be fuzzy and armored, which is actually very close to that first dragon sketch we had, except they wouldn't be fire breathing. Okay, so we have those guys. So then let's look at our burrowers. Yeah. The thing that we might want to do with the burrowers is have those be insectivores, because I think that would make a lot of sense given that there's going to be a ton of termites and such equivalent things here in the savannah. And I think that just would be fun. So if we have those be insectivores, these would sort of be like our anteater equivalents. But instead of, well, they could have the longer nose, but also they have the claws for digging, right? So we'd have digging claws for burrowing. You know what we'd actually probably have for the burrowers? This is going to be really cute. The type of, this is what we were talking about last week for the patrons. The type of pterosaur wing where they could flex more and they could tuck their wing up around under them so that when they laid down, the, like, their resting position, the wings were tucked and they had, like, a really small profile to evade predators. I think if we were going to have burrowing dragons, we'd have to have a similar thing where those wings would need to be really flexible so that they can tuck them under. But I think that this would more be a lack of strength in the wing and a lack of, like, super intensive flying. Because, like, with the pterosaurs that did that, right? They were super, super good flyers. They hunted aerial insects, right? So, like, that allowed them to have a lot of control over their wings. And I feel like the adaptation here would be less so for that. And just maybe the wing is slightly less stable and they don't have all the musculature structures to support that. Because they don't need it, right? They're predominantly on the ground. Or actually, did we decide that for these? Hold on. Are these flying at all? No, we hadn't decided. They would probably be flightless, actually, I would think. Or short distance flighted. We could go either way, but either way, they're probably not major flyers. They definitely aren't long distance flyers and have to be small. Right. Yeah. Yeah, these wouldn't have to be super small. They can make burrows that look like the barrel of a cannon. So they just shoot out like a missile. That would be very funny. They wouldn't be able to take off like that. That would be so cool, though. But, I mean, if they had sufficient, like, flying power still from those, like, they would be able to take off very explosively. But, yeah, because they have to, like, if you remember with the way this wing structure works, they have to kind of do, like, a hurdle to take off where they use their arms to kind of launch themselves in the air and then they spread their wings and fly. Crate dragons? I don't know what that means. Yeah, could just be vestigial enough to still glide. I don't know if they'd have much purpose of gliding though here, because they're not jumping down from trees. These aren't going to be major runners where they would like use those to help with running. But it could have like they could just be in that transitional stage where they can kind of flutter a little or glide a little bit, but don't have very powerful wings, perhaps. So burrow to hide from flying predators. Wings will have shrunk a good bit. Flexibility to tuck wings in resting / burrowing position so that they can, move around like that. I'm picturing them as hop flying. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, yeah. And we can decide based off where we stick them in the cladogram, like how close they are to other flying things. I could see these being like a combination of like an anteater / like a, what am I thinking? Like prairie dogs? Is that what I'm thinking? Prairie dogs are so cool. Let me just tell you. But something like in that general vicinity, they would definitely have burrows. Yeah, so let's think burrowing, they're insectivores. I'm just going to pull this up and talk at you because it's impossible to like really read the cladogram at this scale. Okay, so we have our main insectivore clade, right? Where we have a few different options. We have our wide-mouthed Muppet face ones that hunt flying insects. These would not be those unless they branched off of those because they did have the wing curling adaptation already. We do have, let's see, that's our cat size equivalent. These wouldn't be the dragonfly hunters. We do have mini insectivores that are like tiny. So think like like bat size, maybe a little smaller. Or we could go with the large colony equivalent, which are similar to bats, which the colonies could lean towards having interesting like burrow colonies, which could be interesting. Let's see, vampire bats can be a good. Yeah. So if we went with the large colony insectivores, that could be interesting because they also branched off early. So it makes sense that they would have branched off early enough that we could have a group branching off of it that becomes basically grounded only burrowing insectivores. Naked mole dragons. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. These are our, I don't know if we have them added in here. Insectivore gliders. So I have to add the clade. So So these are going to be our insectivore colony flyers. Okay. Did I do that right, or does this have 2 in it? No, we're not going to multiple clades. Yeah, so they'll come from the insectivore colony flyers. There'll be a branch off of that. We'll probably need to add a sub-branch, which I will add in my separate notes. Sub-branch for burrowing grounded insectivores. Okay. Naked mole rat dragons. That still cracks me. It makes sense, right? If they spend a lot of time underground. So if they are from this clade, then they're not ancestors, but their close relatives, I guess, are very skilled flyers, right? Like they're all very, very good flyers. So these do branch off quickly, the like colony ones, so we could have a relatively early branch that separates them more from them, that makes them less good flyers. I will say though, with the savanna grass shrubland, while I think having flightless things definitely makes sense, the thing we have to keep in mind is that even within a single pillar, right, which is small, right, these are relatively small pillars, the climate stability is going to be rather low, and especially with a savanna where it's already a very stressed ecosystem to maintain that, the odds of there being enough years of it being too dry or something like that happening is kind of high. So like them having some ability to fly, if things get bad enough for them to search out other pillars with similar savannas that they can live on, like I think that would be more likely. Yeah, so we'll go with, I'm gonna go with short distance flighted, but I'm gonna note that these let's see, rarely ever fly, mainly hop/flutter a little, but in event ecosystem collapse could find new home, right? Because in that case, anyone that had actually become flightless would probably die out. So the ones that retained some level of flight would probably have done a better job. Like burrowing owls. Ooh. Ooh. So basically they're like chickens. Yeah, from a flight perspective, very similar to chickens. Sound like mollyfowl. Okay, hold on. Let me look these up. Mollyfowl. Also, hello to the people that I haven't said hello to yet. I'm really bad with remembering to do that when it's not the beginning of the stream. Oh, those are cool. Okay, mollyfowls are a stocky, ground-dwelling Australian bird about the size of a domestic chicken. Do they make large nesting mounds constructed? Okay. Yeah. That's very cool. And burrowing owls. Honestly, burrowing owls is probably a very good comparison. I do like, oh, there's so many cute pictures of them, just like with their heads like this. That's cute. Okay, so let's add / burrowing owls. I think that would be so much fun. Y'all are smarter than me on biology. I feel like I know nothing on biology, but I feel like I've been learning a lot in doing this. Like I'm learning so much making not Earth stuff, which is kind of funny. Okay. So, ooh, we should come over to your stream, George, when you're working on animal words. That would be fun. You should let me know beforehand when you do that next time, and I'll post about it. So these guys, if they're from this track, they are fluffy, specifically fuzzy, right? They have the like dino fuzz that's like sort of like a feather, but not really a feather because they don't have the thing that starts with a B. So helpful. But they're going to be fuzzy. But let's add skinned in there because I could see if we wanted to go like more of the naked mole rat approach, we probably could. But I could see there still being benefits to them being relatively fuzzy, but maybe they have some patches where they're skinned, you know, like on their legs and stuff like that. I could see that. In their wings, I could see the wings losing some of the fur because they wouldn't need like, this clade has like the wing tufts to help them fly silently like owls. Exactly, George, exactly. It's the best part. And also the same thing applies to conlanging live streams. I don't know anything that I'm doing with those. And people have been teaching me. So yeah, I think these would be relatively small. Probably my assumption would be like house cat sized, just because it'll make it easier for them to have their little burrows and have predators like, you know, not chasing into them, because that would be their big advantage to burrowing, is that the most of the dragons that like their wing structure wouldn't allow them to go into the burrow at all, even if they were a similar size. So them being a little bit smaller would really, really help them out, which I think is cool. Okay, so let's talk about our acid spitters, because that's kind of a little bit of not left field, but pulling those in here isn't directly coming from the Savanna thing. It's just because they're cool, right? Well, it would be cool to have dune sandwich, but I feel like the pillars aren't big enough. They just collapse the pillars, you know what I mean? And then everyone would die. Maybe that could be a thing, and that like sometimes some pillars have fallen over and it's like everyone thinks it's because they had giant like sand dragons that just like ate it all up and then it collapsed. Could be fun. Okay, so our catalyst venom spitters, what do we have about these? We know they have to have evolved with certain chemical producing plants, which we haven't talked about that very much. So we could have some of those be savanna plants. Something that they've evolved with. And then they come from the venom spitters, fanged, colorful dragons, dragon fuzz with feathered wings. Yeah, okay. So these in general, let's see. Did we say feathered or did we say fuzzy? Let me trace this back up. I wish there was a better way to do this. Dragon fuzz with feathered wings. So they're a mix. They're a mix of feathered and fuzzy. Feathered and fuzzy. And they could be colorful. Colorful. Yeah, George, the digging with wings thing is weird. Yeah, but these, because, well, I'd have to look into it the way, I haven't looked into typical dragon style wings because we're going with like the pterosaur style here, but like there are definitely not burrowing pterosaurs. Like that definitely wasn't a thing. As far as I'm aware from all the books I've read. I don't even think they had any pterosaurs. Did they actually have any that evolved flightlessness? I'm sure there was. No, I don't think so, because for the most part, the pterosaurs were marine birds. A lot of them were pescivores. They hunted fish, very coastal for the most part, not exclusively, but a lot of them were. Which obviously we're in a very different category here, given that none of those things can exist. But that's okay. Okay, so we need to pick a plant for these to be co-evolved with. And I don't think we had specified this before. I'm going into, you can't quite see it, but I am going into the Pillar World dashboards, into the plants of Pillar World, because I'm hoping I could just do this quickly. And seeing if I had a note somewhere for where our venomous plants would come in. Or not venomous plants, but like our acid spitting. I'm not seeing anything. So we're going to have to decide what would have co-evolved to do that. Actually, let me switch you over. I'm switching you over real quick. Okay, this is our Plants of Pillar World page. So in the savanna, right, we have our netophytes, which is going to be the berry grass, the fruit cups, the desert berry bushes, the herby shrubs, a lot of this low stuff. We have some conifers and cycads, and that's kind of what we've got going on right now. If we have cycads have some poisonous things now, which could make sense. We could have this be a branch off of ginkgos. I feel like cycads would be the most obvious way to go about it. Oh, I don't have a way to make the picture bigger. But I could see that being a thing. I mean, the netophytes potentially might be too arid. I don't know. I feel like the cycad plants makes the most sense. Because like your sago palms have that toxicity already. So I feel like we could have those evolved out. Quetzalcoatlus could fly or just glided, and that's about it. Okay. Interesting. I'd have to look at my book, which I left downstairs, unfortunately, my big pterosaur book. But okay, so let's say that we have these guys are bird nest bird B-U-R-R-E-D. I don't know how to say that in a way where you could tell that I'm not saying bird, like tweet bird, but like bird, like burrs, palm, and we have the flying burr palm, which is explosive. So it wouldn't be one of those. Well, our ground palms are also covered in burrs. So if these all have burrs, every single one of our cycads, we'd either need to come up with a new type of cycad that we'd find here, or we'd have to not actually do cycads. I did have the thought of doing like a vine, but you wouldn't have a vine really like that in the savanna. The struggle. Conifers would probably be easiest to work with because conifers are everywhere. Don't way to make that picture big. Let's not specify this right now because I think this is going to require more work than I think we want to do right now. Here we go. All right. So we're going to leave our co-evolved plants as a question mark, to do. To do co-evolved plant. Maybe, because we do have maybe a conifer. There. Okay. So their defense is obviously going to be acid spitting. And these are very similar to bombardier beetles. It's that similar type of chemical reaction that's happening here. They have their internal venom that they produce from being a venom spitter. And then that combined with a type of almost like nectar they get from a plant. That combined, they join them together when they spit it out, and it creates this like combustion reaction. That might not be the right word, but that's how those work. Those would have to be relatively small. Probably no bigger than dog-sized, based off what Bib was saying about those. It really is a middle name for an insect, bombardier beetle. Yeah, it's pretty great. But these would be like, these are our bombardier dragons, essentially. I do like the idea of some of them being small. I don't know if we'd have those here in the savanna, but somewhere we're going to have little ones that are sort of like the hummingbirds of the bombardier dragon world. But let's make these like, let's go with medium. Let's make these medium size because I think that will help them more with the predators. These are going to be, we'll just have them be normal flighted dragons. These are probably going to be predators, carnivores, nesting. That's a tricky one. If I almost want to know what type of the Humbadeer dragon. Yes. Oh wait. Okay. Hold on. Excuse me. I need to write that down. That's such a great idea. But those would need to be somewhere else. Scroll. Okay. That's so funny. Humbadeer. I will say, when I get around to naming this stuff, I'm not excited to name these. It's going to be such a pain. Okay, so these are going to be our Bombardier Savanna acid spitters, essentially. So if these are basically reliant on the conifer tree, like if that's where we end up having it, it could make sense, like having some branch off of like juniper trees or something where they create nests up in the trees. That could be interesting because they need to be around those trees anyway, and it could be a way of staking their territory. So I'm gonna almost vote we go with arboreal nest. Like, we've all put maybe a conifer, maybe a type of juniper. Also could build nests in these. Something like that, maybe. I feel like I'm not spelling that right. Bombardier? Is that right? I don't know. But that's those. Okay. So we have our, let's see, these grazers are more like rams or bison, not like, call them herding semi-armored grazers. And these are our burrowing termite eaters. Go with that. All right. Because they can also be little bullies who spit acid on the critters below just for fun. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, they could be. It's these ones, our burrowing termite eaters. Those do come from our clade that is very like playful, although this side branch is slightly less playful, more like dogs are playful. Well, maybe not all dogs, but like that sort of that chiller kind of playfulness. But that could come out through something interesting. Okay, so we have some of our lower food chain, mostly dragons. We're going to need something for these bombardier beetles to eat, so we need some more. Well, they can eat some of these, but we'll need to fill that out. We have a grass grazer. We should have something that eats foliage, something that eats berries. We have an insect eater. But one thing that I think we might want to think about first. I was doing a lot of research, and by that I just mean I was reading my pterosaur book. And the thing with the style of wings that we have here with these dragons, that more pterosaur style, is that the bigger they get, the lower an angle they need to take off, right? So like our small one that we were working on last week, the ones that like can kind of curl their wings and they're like relatively small. I think we have them cat-sized. They can almost take off like vertically, right? Like they can just kind of whoop straight up and they can fly. The bigger the dragon, the more of an angle they need for takeoff, right? So they, you know, like they might need to take off like this, which isn't necessarily a running head start, but they need more space essentially to take off. So what that means is you're not going to tend to see large, like very large dragons landing in forested areas. And as you'll note, most of our pillars are very forested, which means that like our very large dragons just aren't really gonna go there. They might hunt around those forests, but like it's gonna be a lot harder for them to take off. And also they wouldn't be able to fly between the trees. So like you're not gonna see them very much. But the Savanna, they can totally land and take off there very easily. So I almost wonder if some of our very large dragons aren't going to just like nest and mate in the Savanna because it's wide open and it's not like they wouldn't have to be like Arctic dragons. Like they could still be tropical frequenting dragons that just land and mate in the Savanna, which I think has a large influence on the food chain here, which would be interesting because right now we have a lot of clades that would be particularly large, right? Let me scroll down to where I have them. We have a bunch of high altitude dragons that are just, those are probably okay in more polar areas, so we probably don't have to worry about those here. But we have a lot of our like apex aerial predators. This might be a good spot for them. Do the big dragons like to jump off the edges of pillars? So like they could, right? Jumping off the edge of a pillar would be a way to take off. But typically that's not going to be how they do it. Even if you look back at like the really big pterosaurs, for the most part, they weren't like jumping off of cliffs and I don't know. Like there could be some that do that. Like if they were by a cliff, they might do that to take off. But it would be a combination of taking advantage of the winds because like the winds are going to be a lot stronger up here, which help. But also like they just launch themselves up, right? So our dragons, other than one of our little basil clades off to the side, our like flightless basil clade that's egg laying, they are ovoviviparous. Yeah, that word. Essentially, they give live birth, but like they are in eggs. Like they have eggs that just hatch inside and then they give birth to them live. So they don't like lay eggs other than that one separate group that does. If so, that means they'd almost certainly be small predators specialized in egg eating. Yeah. So we could throw some of our flightlet, like we could have one of our like egg laying dragons over here. We do have a burrowing and a ground dwelling version that we could have some strains of that are adapted to the Savanna. And then we could have something that eats eggs, but there'd have to be a lot of those, but that could still be doable. So let's add, we'll just add some notes here real quick. So these are our either ground egg layers or burrowing egg layers. We could have both. Burrowing Savanna egg layers. Specifically, these are flightless birds. What do I have on their notes right now? Not much. Herbivores, egg-laying, venomless, not beaks. Yeah, okay, so I think these are supposed to be furry right now. But these are omnivores for the most part. This is Notion, George. So then we can add our ground Savanna egg layers. Ground egg layers. Still flightless. Still omnivores. Fuzzy. And then we can add egg eater, which is it's like a type of predator, right? That would just run around. I imagine them being little flighted guys that just come swoop down and scoop those away. So we have, where could those come from? Probably not. There's probably our venomless track. We have a lot of those. Flightless omnivores, no. Insectivores, no. Herbivores, no. High altitude gliders, no. Pescivores, no. Apex predators, no. Probably not. Ooh, I do like that, Bajiko. Yeah, we're like, yeah. They can scoop up a bunch and fly away. I could see that branching off the, let's see, in like throat filled with eggs. Well, and also a lot of those styles of like especially pescivores with this is very common with a lot of the pterosaurs. Their throat would expand so they could just like eat the fish whole, like they just go down and like, you know. So like also they would probably could just eat them whole, I would think, right? And although if they could stuff their mouth, that they could carry them back for their young, which would make sense. So I do like the idea. Fill with eggs for young. Or eat whole. I do like the idea of that. Okay. Yeah. So those would be flighted. And they would like swoop down, grab a bunch, fly away. Because our basal egg-laying dragons are still very vicious, right? So I think that would help. I'm trying to figure out where they want to come from. No. Not arboreal flying predators, not nocturnal. Honestly, I almost wonder if these would branch off of our just general non-venomous predators. We can stick them under that for now. Oh, yeah. I could see that being opportunists with a penchant for eggs. I could see that. So let me look that up real quick. The shrews. Oh my gosh, they're so cute. Oh, those are really cute. Yeah, not oviraptor. They're omnivores, primarily insectivores, but opportunistic feeders, but these would be bigger. So yeah, so they would be predators, but specifically egg-eating predators. With eggs, eat other small animals, but prefer eggs. Compies, maybe? Hold on. Compy. Oh, those vibes. Yeah, that's sort of I'm sort of imagining that's sort of a thing, but like flying. Defense. I think most of their defense would just be aerial, although they'd have to hunt animals as well. So probably some level of claws, etc. What are our non-venomous predators? What do we know about them? They're flighted, more stealth colored, but could have dynamic patterning. Aerial predators, semi-feathered wings, fuzzy bodies. That works. Fuzzy and feathered. We could come from those, like aerial predators. Honestly, I think that might make more sense. Yeah, get them more specific down in there. Okay, yeah. I think that makes sense. So fuzzy / feathered a little bit. Description. Dynamic, stealth, coloring, stalk, sneak up on prey, / steal their eggs. Like puppies. Copy. Let's add that note there. Okay. That could also provide a reason why the burrowing dragons may hide their eggs or make a nest that is covered. Yes, I like that. Okay. Yeah. So the burrowing ones hide it. Yeah, because even the ones that live on the ground doesn't mean they don't bury their eggs, right? They could still do something like that to protect them. I like that. Okay, so we have our egg eaters. We have those. So now I want to go back to our large predators. And typically our motto here is that while we're going in the biomes, we're starting just with the things that are more biome specific, because a lot of dragons are going to move between biomes, and like we are going to mostly deal with those later once we have a lot of the biomes figured out. But I feel like this makes such a good opportunity for our large flying dragons to be here. Like, I just think it makes so much sense. Hello, Jake. Ooh, Edgar's Guarani stream just finished. Very good. Oh yeah, because it was the Friday streams. Yeah. Okay, so I think our biggest ones right now, and we could have a lot of varieties, but mainly we're going to be looking at our very large aerial predators. So, let's see. We have aerial predators here. Let me see what else we have connected to these. Nocturnal apex predators, arboreal flying predators. Yeah, so basically these dragons. These, I think, are going to, where's our description? Mate/nest in more open environments, like the Savanna. This wouldn't be the only place, but like this would be like their main, their best choice, right? I think this would be one of the best choices for them. But we would see other things coming up. So like we'd see them. I need to add biomes for just like flying around and like cliff sides and stuff, like the sides of the pillars. But we'd see them in those places. So these were, I think, fuzzy feather, just like those last ones. And we don't need to add a lot of specifics, but like this is mostly just an example large aerial predator, which means that they'd probably pick off like easy pickings in this area too, which would potentially lead to it being slightly less predator heavy, even if we had a lot of like large herbivores, which we don't necessarily. But okay, so these are carnivores. Nests for these. So a lot of these kinds of predators would probably have smaller things. So sort of like, not like a cliffside lair necessarily. But I could see them having more temporary nests if they mostly, well, because if they slept here and raised their young here, they'd potentially want more permanent nests. But I don't imagine it being too crazy. Like, because they wouldn't necessarily need it to be. But I do like the idea of it being somewhere less reachable, but I'm not sure if that's as much of an option for them in the Savanna, you know? So I might go with this for now, and we can always refine that as we go through more in depth. Defense will mainly be their size. They're going to be huge. Fangs, teeth, claws, all of that is going to be intense. Size, elephant. We will have the giant whale ones, but I don't think those will ever need to land. It should be relatively easy for their size. The bigger you are, the more efficient you can be at just like what's the one where they don't have to flap a lot, more of like the glided flying, or is it called powered soaring or unpowered soaring? I think the unpowered soaring type of flight gets really efficient when they get larger, to the point that it wouldn't be that hard for us to say that we have these giant flying dragons that just never land, and they're mostly just like moving on the winds, you know, and they only have to land to like maybe mate or something, you know, in which case they'll knock a bunch of trees over or something. I don't know. But yeah, these would be our big elephant friends. Maybe they're like planes. Yeah, just flying around, living their best life. Oh, we didn't give sizes to these. I mean, these are mostly relatively small. I imagine that, yeah, they're all in that kind of category. But okay, so we added one of our predators in there just for fun. So what do you all want to do next? We could do scavengers. We could pull some of those in. We haven't done those yet. We could do canopy foliage eaters. We could go into some berry eaters. Those are all good options. Yeah, we would definitely have a lot of dragons that like to live around the cycads. So that's also a route that we can go in, like the burr eaters probably. That because they'd have all those like water areas in the cycads. And they could hide in there. Scavengers are a neat idea. Okay, let's do the scavengers next. Because we do have a little track of scavengers. Where are those branched off of? Our aerial scavengers. We have two main groups of aerial scavengers where they've turned their venom systems into things that can help like aid digestion and breakdown of decomposing animals. And then we also have our little tiny remora-like riders, which are our smaller scavengers that just catch a ride, which I actually think it makes sense for us to talk about those here because they're probably following those giant predators, right? So it makes sense that they would sort of like live around them and catch a ride. So let's do two here. Let's do our I'm just gonna write scavengers. We need to figure out like to call them, I guess, Savanna. They wouldn't be limited to the Savanna probably, but aerial scavengers. Yeah, these would be typically these kinds of scavengers are going to be good for longer distance flighting because they're going to need to be good at just like soaring around looking for prey. So we'll go with that. We'll go with like I don't know. At some point I need to sit down and we need to all just talk about nests and how those are going to work. Because like it's not, bird nest isn't really a good example, but I sort of lean toward these being more like the family colony lodges. I don't know. Defense. Normal stuff. Buzzards. Our aerial scavengers, what did we say these were? I feel like trying to think what would lead well to the remoras, but let's just leave them fuzzy for now. We could make them scaled just for fun, but actually scaled might make sense, or at least having a combination of scales and fur, like if especially their face being more scaled could be interesting, and then maybe they still have some fuzz in other places. I think that makes sense. And these would be probably a little bit larger. Probably say dog size. I feel like so many things are end up being dog sized here. So we'd have those, and then I think we could have the remora-like ones, the ones that like catch a ride on the larger aerial predators. So we'll call them like piggyback scavengers. These are just random words. Yeah. More like riding scavengers. These would be short distance flighted. They're pretty small, so they wouldn't be able to like really cross pillars on their own. That's why they catch a ride. So we'll have those be pretty small. So catch a ride with the large aerial predators and essentially clean up afterwards. It's kind of the idea. I could see those. I'm trying to think, did we ever talk about how they would attach on? Let's see. Other large flies to scavenge their leftovers, also eat bugs and pests off the larger dragons. Could have some families that scavenge around human settlements. Okay. So they're both scavengers and insectivores. I think that would make sense. Their defense is mostly symbiotic relationship / hang out with intimidating friends, essentially, right? Like that's kind of what they're doing. Okay. Remora? I think that's similar. So I imagine these would kind of live. It's kind of hard because if they're catching rides places, you'd think they'd either kind of all have to stay together because they wouldn't have as much control over returning places if they're just catching a ride. Now, the predators that they're following around for the most part would return to their nest. So like it makes sense that they would also like either stay in the nest and they help keep the nest clean, right? So I could see that where they just kind of follow around the nests of the large aerial predators. I could see that working. Yeah, and so the way they'd hook on, because these they're fuzzy and feathered, so they'd probably need some way to latch onto that. That could just be like the way their claws are made that they could latch on. Trying to think if there's another way that they could easily like hold on, because it's possible that these large aerial predators have some sort of display feature or structure that makes it easy for these scavengers to hold on. Could be some sort of like spinal structure. Could be something with how their tail is, if they still have much of a tail left. I imagine these would be fairly likely to lose the tail at this point, the super big large ones. But how would they hold on? Find their mouths unlikely? Yeah, I like that. Yeah, something like that. I mean, either way, they'd have pests on them of some form that these could then eat and help, clear the pests off of them. That's defense. We want description. Also, them and their nests. Queen of pests. I think that all makes sense. But yeah, if they are fuzzy, like it does make sense that like, or they could have not like a mane, but like part of them could be fuzzier that makes it easier to like hold on to. Maybe they have a fur. Okay, hear me out. What if their fur is almost Velcro-like in some spaces? Like what if they're furry, but they have like really tight, like curled, stiff, coarse fur on their bellies? And then what if the really big ones, like on their spine or something, they have that kind of really coarse fur, or like along their tails or something, and they literally just like Velcro to each other a little bit. Like, that would be very, very funny, but I'm kind of into it. Let's see. Horse curly hair on tummy to Velcro to larger dragons. So these could potentially have coarser / curly hair along. But they could clean each other off, Gregatron. Like, they could, like, groom each other, you know? Oh, you were thinking the other way around. Yeah. I could see it either being... I'm trying to imagine the, like, aerodynamics of this. I could see it being something along, like, the back of the neck in particular, working out well. Yeah, along the back of the neck. Almost lion's mane-esque. But, like, just, like, in the back and just, like, kind of, like, shorter, kind of, like, I don't know, little froze back there. I don't know. Or the, Velcro from Horus to stick to. / cling to. You can't, what? Oh, yeah, okay, they're up there. Okay, cool. I like that a lot. I think that's fun. Okay. So now we have our scavengers. We have those big predators. Let's talk about the dragons that live in the cycad trees now, because I think that will be interesting. Basically, it'd be a good way to hide from predators, to like scoop down in there, and they'd want to be burr eaters. I feel like we need a whole... Oh, Velcro scale. Hell yeah. Good call. Okay. Our burr eaters, let me try to think about that real quick. So the burr eaters, they're going to need specialized teeth for this. So they're probably going to be pretty optimized. They're going to need to get up in the tree. They'd probably still be flighted to be able to, like, just scoop down in there. You know what I mean? So I think... they'd definitely be small to fit in the cycad trees. Trying to look. I don't think they'd be armored. I think they could. No. This will have to be another branch off our early herbivores. That's like our burr eaters. So let's actually add those in. Now they're just cats. That's okay. Oh wait, did we already have anything with like burr eaters? Actually, now that I think about it. I don't think we already have burr eaters. Okay. So let's add burr eaters. Evolved features. So these would have predominant. I can spell grinding teeth, strong jaws to be able to crack the burrs, probably tough mouths and digestive systems. Yeah, that sort of thing. And these would definitely be herbivores. So we could see a lot of those like herbivorous traits, you know, like eyes more on the sides of the head. These are going to be hiding, so they probably camouflage more so. I think these are going to need to have the... I always do that. I mean, these are their wings, right? These are the entire pterosaur wings. They're little things that have to have the curvy thing, the more flexible, can't remember what it's called, so that they can like tuck their wings in if they're going to be hiding like this in the like cups of these cycad trees. So probably wings that can tuck in. Camouflage. I always forget the U. Because of this, they're probably going to have like wider heads a little bit to be able to get all that grinding action going on that they're going to need, like that super strong jaws, and like their muzzles are going to like probably shorten a little bit so that they can like really have all that strength in the back. Especially shorter. Yeah. So then what we'll have is our Savanna, cycad, we'll just say cycad, burr eaters. Burr eaters. They'll be flyers. They'll be herbivores. I think it would make sense for them to kind of like create their nests in or around these. Like maybe they can build it up around it. Like so it sort of looks like it continues as part of the cycad tree, but it isn't, if that makes sense. And that would be a good place to get water, right? Because water is going to pool there and stuff. And that'll kind of have a, like they'll have sort of co-evolved with them to an extent to be able to do that. Now, our burr eaters, oh, we didn't give them an ancestor. Flying herbivores. Yeah. Starts to have scales along / some areas. Yeah. So I think these would probably be scaled for the most part. I think, right, because if you're thinking about burrs, the burrs would stick to them, which isn't necessarily a problem. Although the trees would evolve for the burrs to stick to them and them to take them other places, then have to like kick them off. So the trees would like them to have fur. But they'd probably like to be like more scaled. I'm not sure what wins out here, or if we'd see a little bit of both, like ones that just hide there, that the burrs would stick to their fur. Because they could also just like, it's fine if the burrs stick to them and they kick the burrs off and then they eat them, you know? Wouldn't necessarily be the craziest thing. So I think... Let's see. It's kind of like people with beards. They have leftover soup for later. Yeah, I mean, it could be like an intentional thing, where they could just like rub around in it and then take the burrs into their nest. Like it could be how they transport the burrs, but it could also be less advantageous for them moving around. That's a tough one. It's a tough one. Let's do... Oh, that's really tough. Maybe we'll have them continue to be like a combination where they're scaled in some parts and fuzzy in some parts. They still do kind of catch, but they can limit it so that it's not going to restrict their movement, right? Because they wouldn't want the burrs to keep them from flying, right? So they would be scaled anywhere it would be restrictive of movement to fly. Will kind of be the idea there. Yeah. So these mostly hide in please. So yeah. Okay. And these would be relatively small. Probably bat-sized. So then I wonder also, though, if it could be interesting to have a small venomous herbivore or something that like lives in these areas too, that can just like hide down in there, and if anything comes to get water, they're just like, yo, I'm super colorful and like I'll kill you with all my venom, and then they're like, whoa, okay, I guess this is your watering hole kind of thing. That could be interesting as well. Because we also need to think about the foliage eaters. You know, like they probably wouldn't be huge with long necks. Like I don't think we'd see that sort of a look. Although there were definitely plenty of like they're definitely like pterosaurs that were that size that did that. So like they could still fly, not with that intense of a long neck, but mostly they were pescivores, and it was like for fishing, not for eating foliage. And they also wouldn't be flyers probably if they're like, I cannot imagine a flying dragon that just eats leaves. I don't think that would be very effective, right? They would not get a lot of food from that. But it could be something that climbs, sort of like koala-esque, that just like climbs around and just like eats its leaves all the time. It could even be like a glider, right? It could even be a, let's see what we got. We do have venomous gliders. We could have a branch of those that become, because you don't have to be a predator to be venomous. Although I'm just trying to imagine like venomous koalas. I mean, it's kind of a vibe. It would require a new clade of gliding. What are those called? Foliagivores? Foliagivore? Let me Google that because that's not how you spell that. Predators are venomous. Oh, okay. Poisonous. Then they'd be poisonous. Okay. Yeah. Venomous koala is a great band name, though. Yeah. Folivore. Interesting. Folivore. Yeah, yeah. So these would come from venomous gliders. So these would be poisonous. So for the poison, because their ancestors would have had like venomous fangs, right? Koala and zombies. So I'm trying to think of how, like, I mean, it could definitely move from just being the fangs. Like, it could move to, like, being in some pores that it, like, excretes on, like, the side of its neck that it, like, then rubs over its body or something. Like, Like Googling where's the poison usually? Yeah, specialized glands are secreted under their skin. Yeah, or within specific glands. Yeah, okay, so let's go with that because I think that works with their, like, I think that makes sense. So their venom gland / fangs have evolved to be secreted and held in glands on the sides of their neck / neck. They then rub this all over their bodies to ward off predators. Still very colorful. So now they would have like teeth for cutting leaves and chewing leaves. They're gliding fulgiovores. Good climbing claws and legs. We'll go with that. Venomous gliders. We have those as scaled right now. So I think it makes sense for them to still be scaled because it would make it easier for them to rub their poison all over themselves. So let's add those real quick. These are going to be our folivores, gliding folivores. And these will specifically be cycad. Well, they don't necessarily have to be cycad ones, but like that's what I'm sort of imagining them hanging out like we'll just call them scaled folivore gliders. They all are that, but like we'll just call them that. Yeah. Okay, so they're gliders. They are folivores, which I'm just going to add that. Nesting types. They could also live in arboreal nests, but I guess. Why are people adding me in Discord? Okay. It kind of makes sense for them to have arboreal nests. I mean, the problem is like I'm trying to think of animals we have that are poisonous that like aren't amphibians. That aren't aerial folivore is such a wild niche. Yeah. Well, and they're just gliders too. They're just gliders. Because they wouldn't like have that much energy for proper powered flight. Do you have any snakes or snake-like animals? So we can have snakes. Snakes is an option. There were, I think, constrictors. Let me look this up real quick. What? Do I have my book? No, not next to me. What snakes were in the Triassic? I mean, they could have evolved the same snakes anyway. Hello, Bib. We are talking about our gliding folivore that will be poisonous. And we're trying to figure out how this would work. Must have snake. There will probably be some sort of like constrictors or something like that at some point. I think in the Triassic, it was more early snake reptiles. Like, I don't know if they were like snakes quite yet, but there might have been like near the end. Bib would know this. I I feel like there might have been like some early constrictors. I feel like that was starting to become a thing. But yeah. Okay, wait. Animal inspo, poisonous koalas that are less lazy. That's the idea there. Yeah, so we'd have, they'd glide around, they'd climb up the trees, they'd have like their well-developed like claws and everything for that. And they'd be really colorful. Yeah, defense, so coloration to show they are poisonous would be the big defense, and obviously being poisonous would help. They can also like glide, so that would also help them evade predators a bit. I'm trying to like picture these guys. Have you looked at the slow loris? They have poison glands on their elbows. Hold on, let me Google those. Slow loris. Oh my goodness. Y'all should Google them. They are really cute. They've got their anything with giant eyes is just 10 out of 10. Okay, but this is an example of a poisonous non-amphibian, right? Or non-reptile, which is very helpful. They're nocturnal. That does kind of track. They don't look obviously poisonous. Okay, how venomous is the slow loris? And it's with their bites? And then they secrete toxins from their elbows, and then they lick it and mix it with their saliva and then bite you. That's delightful. Wow. And they can also lick the toxin into their fur, making themselves unpalatable to predators. Okay, so we're doing something similar here with them like rubbing it all over their skin. Yeah, lorises are wild. Let me add that as a like a slow loris. Getting some vibes in there. Okay. So I feel like we should probably have, because I don't know how long it takes them to become, well, actually, we have the slow loris right here. What age, like, can they from birth produce poison, right? Like, how much do they need to be protected? So apparently I think true snakes didn't appear until the Jurassic period. Okay, that's helpful, Majiko. I mean, it makes sense that they could potentially evolve here. Yeah, not very well understood. Yeah. I think there's no reason to think that if there is an advantageous niche for the snakes that they wouldn't evolve, although we are getting rid of basically all other reptiles for the most part. Yeah, like honestly, if we really wanted to, instead of snakes, we could have legless dragons. Like we could probably do that if we wanted to. Najash that retained its back legs. That's so weird. Yeah, so like we could make like dragon snakes if we wanted to as well. Like if we wanted leglessness, we could do it. So it looks like slow lorises begin to produce their own venom at approximately 6 weeks old. Oh, and before they can produce their own, the mothers will often coat their infants in their venom to protect them while foraging. Oh my god. That's so cute. Okay. Oh my god, that's killing me. Okay. Mothers could use secreted poison to coat their babies. Make their own. Oh, so we have dragons and serpents that are related. Well, they wouldn't be, so if they do evolve from the dragons, they wouldn't be like cold-blooded. Because I have these dragons. I decided they were warm-blooded. Which could be cool. And it does fit the vibe, yeah. Oh my I'm now in love with these guys. Okay, so here's a question. Do we want them to be nocturnal? Because right now we don't have any nocturnal animals in our savanna. I still don't know if we want them to have... There's not going to be a ton of these, right? Because there's not a ton of foliage in the savanna in the first place, but... Yeah, if they are... Like, if we wanted them to look like a slow loris, they would be nocturnal, because the slow lorises are nocturnal. But we don't necessarily need to do that, and we do have them coming from venomous ancestors that are not nocturnal. So they would have had to evolve to be nocturnal, which could be a way to avoid prey, but they're already like poisonous. So I'm not sure like if that coloration is one of their major defense mechanisms. I'm not sure if it would necessarily make sense for them to go nocturnal. Oh, generally speaking, most animals that have lost their limbs evolved from burrowing ancestors. Okay. Well, we have some burrowing dragons. We have our little our burrowing termite eaters. Those could have a legless branch from those if we wanted, which would be really weird actually, because those come from our like very like they wouldn't be scaled if we did that, because those are fuzzy, maybe skinned, because those come from our group that has the really cute like the cute little guys, the like cat-like ones. So that would be very interesting. But we could also have them evolve from our burrowing basal dragons. Well, those mostly didn't change a lot. Yeah, we'd have like fuzzy or just like skin snakes, which like, no, we're not doing that. Nope. 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 I wish I could just unsay that. Yeah, fuzzy snakes. They could be fuzzy. And even these burrowing egg layers are fuzzy. To some extent. Fuzzy snakes. Yeah, we could have fuzzy dragon snakes if we wanted. Let me add a higher level note about these. Yes, we could have multiple lineages losing limbs. What would like make it advantageous to be limbless? Because especially for these, no Majiko, no. But like they would already have that type of pterosaur wing that's more flexible, that can curl up under them, right, to help with the burrowing and having their wings not be in their way. But I could see in general anything that is extensively like burrowing, it could make sense to lose, especially those front limbs. Although the only problem, then they wouldn't be able to dig anymore. But snakes burrow. Burrowing is easier without limbs. Is it? How do they like, do they just like go like against the ground with their heads until like, you would have to have a relatively soft substrate for that, right? Basically, you don't need to move as much dirt. Oh, what about, but like, don't the worms eat it? Don't the worms like eat the dirt and then like, they're just like, isn't that what worms do? I don't know. I might not know anything about worms. I have a whole bucket of worms in my basement, and by that I mean my husband has a bucket of worms in our basement to make like worm castings. I don't know. It's crazy. Yeah, maybe in more sandy soil. So in the savanna, okay. This is where no one tell Will, if Will shows back up, that we are Googling this. What kind of soil do you tend to see in the savanna? I can't remember. There tend to be nutrient poor, porous, can be dry, tend to have a clay-rich subsoil layer. Okay, so that makes me think that's a good idea, Majiko. Erosion is limited. This is one of the few magical effects that we have just to make this feasible at all, there is a reduced erosion. Yes. Snakes are deceptively strong. But they literally just like head first force their way through the ground then? Like they're just like, like, is that, you know, I'm Googling other things. But if the soil is likely to be more richer in clay, not necessarily everywhere. It depends. Although it looks like actually sandier, porous soils could be good and be more likely to have savanna vegetation. That could be interesting. So we could have some sandier soils. That could make sense. Because, like, clay, I find unlikely. You could do something like the Mexican mole lizard. Oh, my God. This is going to be weird looking, isn't it? Mole lizard. What am I looking at? How is this real? They look like if millipedes and, I don't know, lizards had a baby? That's so weird. I clearly did not have a good understanding of how digging works. These things are odd looking. Oh my gosh. They're so weird looking. Yeah, naked mole rat and a snake had a love child. True, Michelle. True, Michelle. It is weird out there. Okay, so yeah, I think we're gonna have to do a clade at some point. And it would make sense probably in the savanna over other biomes to have evolved this, actually, now that I think about it. Like, I just think that the type of soil here would make sense for that being more likely. I like the idea. I do like the idea of it coming from the same insectivore colony. They would definitely need to be, yeah, okay, because our insectivore colonies branch off early, right? So they would have enough time potentially to become legless. So let's add a new clade from our insectivore colony flyers, and we will call this our, in quote, legless, because they might not be fully legless. We'll have to decide. Burrowing snakes. Something like that, right? Lose their limbs. Lose their limbs to aid burrowing skills. Yeah, we'll go with that. Okay. And then we'd have, where they go? Legless burrowing snakes. Okay. They could still have little front legs to help with digging. I wonder how that would look from, like, a pterosaur perspective. Like, I wonder if they just lose that, like, back pinky structure entirely. You're gonna have to start giving binomial names at some point. Yeah, it's a problem. Like, it's a problem because everywhere is gonna have different names for these things, and I will have to decide what I want to name them, like, for my reference, which will be different than what they're named everywhere else. The Mexican mole lizards are kind of cute. They are kind of cute. I do kind of like the idea of that. It's so funny. Yeah, I think I saw the same one as you, Magico, the one where they're smiling. It gives axolotl vibes a little bit, you know? So let's just, like, naked. Well, no, because they wouldn't be naked. Well, they could lose their fur. I don't know how likely they would be to go having already developed fur to then developing scales. I don't know if that would necessarily make sense, but they could literally be, like, naked mole rat snake lizards. Like, we could do that kind of a vibe. But they could just be furry too. Like, that's also an option. Like, I don't know what makes the most sense. Generally, burrowing animals tend to lose their fur. Okay. So let's call them our naked mole lizard snake. It's fine. It's fine. So these are flightless. These would probably still be insectivores, nesting. They'll still have burrows. Defense, hide in their burrows. These would have long lost their venom. And I don't know if I want to go. So these aren't pterosaurs technically, George. They do probably have similar cousins far back in the train, but these do not have beaks. I could evolve some of these to have beaks, potentially, but I've done a decent bit of research in it, and I don't actually think I'm going to do that. I think I'll probably keep them. Like, some of them might not have teeth, but they won't necessarily have beaks. Yeah. Yeah. They're talking about pterosaurs with them is just helpful because they have that style of wing, and also they do have some similar ancestry. So like there's some like parallels that you can draw, but they're not evolved from pterosaurs. They're like if there was a pterosaur cousin that was like a dragon, and it's the pillar world. Yeah. Defense, they hide in their burrows. And this makes sense because we already have this like fuzzy skinned variety. So go all the way there. So these would be like, oh, what was the ones that we said? Mexican mole lizard. Wild. Yeah, I mean, it basically would be similar to a Mexican mole lizard, you know? Like, skin, naked. They've got to have the arms, though. If they're naked, they have to have the arms. Just have 2 little arms to help dig. And otherwise, I like a naked lizard. I'm saying lizard because, yeah. Somebody watching should make limbless birds for their world because the image of a limbless animal with a beak is in my brain now. Yeah. Yeah. And these would probably be relatively small. We'll say house cat sized. No, we're going to say bat sized. And then we didn't pick a size for our gliding folivores. I like the idea of them being a little bigger just because it's weird. Bye, Kyle. Yeah. Okay. So what else do we want to add here? We have some scavengers. We have some basic carnivores. We don't have any larger carnivores that like hunt in this area. So we could look into something like that. Let's see, what else do we have? We don't have berry eaters. We could add more herd animals. Yeah. Someone make a decision. Speak now or I'll be sad. I don't know. I think that makes a lot of sense. And we'll have things flying in because like the savannas are going to be mostly not like microclimates, but there'll be small portions of pillars, mostly because again, this is a very rain heavy area. This is the tropics, just higher up. Mostly we're just going to see these in like rain shadows and some places like that. So there will be plenty of dragons from other nearby biomes that could then come into the savanna for various reasons. So they're not going to be like isolated, if that makes sense. See. Yeah, we haven't done berry eaters. Could have more predators. Yeah. We could have a large... How big are our large herbivores? We have them being like large mastiff sized. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. I think the stream's caught up, and I don't think anyone has ideas. So unless someone throws out with something, we're going to move to some berry eaters, because I think that makes sense. Yeah, because there'll be a lot of low down berries. And this is also something that our ground, where are they? Our ground egg layers, they will probably eat a lot of berries, because there'll be a lot of that at that level, like the fruit cups, which is delightful. And in fact, I don't think we're going to have any trees here that grow berries, although junipers. Hold on, let me pull up Plants of Pillar World. Let me go down to our juniper trees and see if... we do have them having... Oh yeah, because they'd have juniper berries. Like something similar to that. Okay, so these would have berries. So there would be tree height berries in some places. That would happen. So we could have some more like arboreal berry eaters, and we could have some more grounded ones. Let's add one like arboreal berry eater. Do I have a separate thing for this? Not specifically. And it's like technically they're not fruits. So like I don't want to use the word for like a fruit eater. Will there be any monkey-like animals? The dragons are the monkey-like animals. The ones that like either are like arboreal flightless or arboreal gliders will be very similar niche-wise, like monkeys. Or fruit eaters. It's like frugivore or something like that. Yeah, frugivore. So frugivore. Let me see where that word comes from, because I want to make a version that's like a berryvore. Which like we could just call it that, but I mean they're not technically berries. I mean in this world they count. We'll just we're just gonna go with that. That's a new category. It's fine. Okay, we'll go... These could be flighted. They would probably be short distance flyers. This would potentially come from our herbivore track. So our flying herbivores. Let's see what we have in that clade right now. Early armored flyers. These would not be armored flyers. These would not be giant. These would not be burr eaters. What are they if they're not fruit? I mean, technically, aren't these like arils? Like juniper, berry. I think they're arils, aren't they? But they're berry-like. Yeah, they're like berry cones, sort of. Which I feel like we can still call them... I don't know. Because they're not from angiosperms. Like, it's all from the gymnosperms. They're just like things that have sort of evolved to be like fruit and be like berries. Which, I mean, we can call them fruit. Like, I don't know if it's pedantic to, like, say they're not fruit when they're just not, like, earth fruit. I don't know. I don't know if that distinction matters or if they'd evolve to be so close, even though they're from gymnosperms and not angiosperms. So, like, a lot of our fruits are more, like, really fleshy cones, and would a non-botanist call them fruit? I mean, do you have any idea what we do with tomatoes? I don't know if that's a good argument. Yeah, okay, so these would just come off flying herbivores. I feel like we could have a specific clade. They probably wouldn't, like, it'd be more like multiple co-evolved clades off of the flying herbivores, but I feel like it might make sense to have a specific, like, specialized berry eater. Flying berry eaters. Tomatoes are technically beef. Everything is fruit. Okay. So if they're optimizing for eating berries, I don't really know off the top of my head what those kinds of optimizations are. I mean, like, they're already from herbivores. Berries are pretty soft. They're not specifically eating the burrs. So I'll just write berry eating teeth. I don't know. There, that's super helpful. Everything is fruit. Thank you, George. I had a long phase where I sang that all the time, but for everything is awful. And that was like my thing that I would do when things were bad. I would just be like, everything is awful. And then like make stuff up based off why it was awful. Okay, so these would basically be our juniper berry eaters specifically, right? That's your thing right now, Greg, at work? All right, well, we're twins, clearly. So if these are more, like, they could eat berries off the ground too, but I think they'd be more specialized specifically for the juniper berries. So let's add, do we have our juniper trees here? No, we haven't specifically added those, but it would be 4 juniper trees. Prefer to eat juniper berries. Oh, except you say awesome. Oh, okay. Well, maybe we're not quite twins. I'm the more pessimistic version, I guess. More dramatic, maybe? Yeah. Okay, so these little dudes, what do we have about flying herbivores? Yeah, we decided not to go the beak route, but they do have more of a, like, different kind of teeth structure. Yeah, so their ancestors have some scales. So they're fuzzy and scaled, so we could go either way. Having a scaled berry eater is an interesting concept. But let's see. I'm trying to think of what would make more sense for them to have. Scales or fur? I lean towards fur just because I feel like a lot of things that fit this similar niche are more furry, you know, like, because this is very much a, like, monkey kind of thing. Like, these are like the little lemurs of the savannah. So I lean towards them being fuzzy. Fuzzy. And I lean towards that being something we see here. Fuzzy, evolved features, loose, scales, and only furry. Go with that. And then, let's see. What would their defense mechanism be? Could be camouflage. They're climbers, so they would still have relatively robust claws. So they could have some level of defense from their claws. They would still have some teeth, so they could still fight that way. And I do think it makes sense for these to live in family groups. So maybe arboreal nests? I don't know. Maybe not actually arboreal nests. I don't know. I think that would make sense, actually. So maybe they are more likely to be more camouflaged. Parkour legends in the trees? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and they could like fly away and they'd have to like evade predators and yeah. So I feel like to an extent they would be camouflaged, which makes sense because they come from like herbivores that it makes sense for them to want to be more camouflaged. They haven't been venomous in quite a while. So some camouflaged, so some camouflage, also claws/teeth, to some effect. I feel like you would also still see some of that group mobbing kind of effect. I think that would make sense. Flying lemur vibes. Yeah. Okay, I think that makes sense. So that gives us our flying berry eaters. So let's add ground berry eaters. And let's add some armored. I think that makes sense for us to have pull in some of our flightless armored flightless dragons here. More heavily armored for defense, pangolin style. These tend to be insectivores though. But they don't need to be insectivores. We could have, why did I have these be insectivores? Flying herbivores, armored. We'll say some of them maybe became like more opportunity where they had some like general vegetation and also insectivores, maybe. You could give them long tongues like giraffes since they use a long tongue to snake between thorns to pick out the leaves. They also coat thorns with thick saliva in case they are swallowed. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, I think that makes sense to have the longer tongues to grab the berries. I like it. I like it. How far behind is chat right now based off what you see? Like, is it like 5 seconds, 10 seconds longer? Because I feel like it might be slowing down. I don't know if it's lagging at all. Hello, Ronnie the zombie. Yes. Okay, let's go with that. 10 seconds longer. Okay. So these are essentially going to be pangolin-like scaled. Like scales, berry eaters, foreground vegetation. I think that makes sense. And I like the idea of them having the longer tongue too. Could have longer tongue. I think that makes sense. And I think it makes the most sense for the ground ones, just based off how some of these work, like their little fruit cups. I could imagine those be harder to work around it, and the little desert berry bushes. I think that could all make sense. So let's give these little like pangolin dragons long tongues to reach, pluck berries. They probably wouldn't need much in the way of claws because they're not climbers. They're not going to need the claws necessarily for defense. They're not burrowers. So unless we decided we wanted them to keep the claws for like sexual selection or for like maybe they do dig burrows to sleep in, we could see that sort of being a thing. Definitely armored. They're definitely flightless with all that going on. Yeah, it would depend on how we have them nest. And what kind of structure they use for that. Yeah, these would be our pangolin-like berry eaters. Essentially, what size would they be? Oh, we haven't done the juniper berry eaters either. I think those would be maybe like maybe dog or maybe cat size might be easier because the flying, like eating berries and the flying, like the berries are going to be good food, but I think maybe house cat size. And I think these guys could be a little bit bigger. The question is, do we want them to be dog sized or do we want them to be bigger? I feel like I kind of want to make them bigger. I don't know. Can anyone think of a good reason not to make them bigger? Because, like, if the predators can't get to them as easily, and that you would have those, like, giant, like, I would imagine are, like, really big predators, if they tried hard enough, could maybe figure out how to eat one of them, right? But they'd have to be, like, really trying. But for the most part, they'd be protected against a lot of things, which would be helpful. And it's kind of a cool mental image, you know? Kind of reminds me of what are those like things called, like Raya the Last Dragon? Where it like rolls into the ball and it's like giant. It's sort of making me think of those. I feel like there would be some vibes there. For sure. Yeah. All right, so we have grass grazers. We could add another one, like a smaller one. Yeah, we could add a smaller. Tuk Tuk? I think I mean Tuk Tuk. That sounds about right. Last dragon, Tuk Tuk. The giant pill bug guy? Oh, yeah, he is a little bit different. Okay, he's more of a... Okay. Well, but, like, there's some vibes there. Not really. They're not really similar at all. Okay. I was imagining him different in my head. Yeah. He is cute, though. I do think he's very cute. It wouldn't be that surprising to have something like that, though. Like, more articulated, like, hard shell. We could definitely have, like, some of those. If we wanted to at some point. But, yeah. Okay. So, what else do we want to have? I hear my child knocking on a door, but not mine. What's going on? I don't know what's going on. If they only eat berries, the berries are going to have to be extremely common for them to reach large sizes. That's a good point. Well, honestly, I feel like it is fairly common. Like, even though it is the savanna, most of the grass, like the general grasses that we have has, like, it's more sparse, but it does have like some berries or like berry grass. Like almost everything other than our like herby shrubs is all going to have berries. So I feel like there could be enough. I feel like that could be reasonable. And maybe there's not as many of them. Yeah, it would be hard for them to get that big. Yeah, because things are relatively sparse in the savanna, but I feel like there would be enough that we could at least support some of them, you know? We'd probably need to have some smaller grounded berry eaters. Maybe even something fairly similar to these that just is smaller. I think that could potentially make sense. Yeah. Yeah. We'll say that. Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else we might want to add. Like there's like general like having alternative things at different sizes that we could do if we wanted. But I feel like we've covered generally all the niches unless anyone has ideas, right? Because we have grazers, only one, but we do have a grazer. We have termite insect eaters. We have lots of burrowers, honestly. We really only have a few carnivores. We have berry eaters. Yeah, because if we really wanted to, could add smaller grounded berry eater. Needs to be small. We could add nocturnal, some of the nocturnal ones that we already have in other places potentially. We could have smaller herding herbivores, more gazelle or smaller sized, because our herding semi-armored ones are already not that big. They are large, so we have like mastiff sized. So yeah, we could have something that's like medium-sized dog sized or even cat sized potentially. Let's see. Yeah, we could have a flightless predator could be an option. We could add, I'm trying to think of like potentially what else we might want. I feel like this is relatively good. I do like our little Velcro guys. I think that makes sense. Yeah. And our juniper berry eaters, now that I look at this, are fuzzy. So I imagine they would potentially pop into these cycad trees to get water as well and get burrs stuck to them and then just be like, oh no, not the burrs, and then like take them places too. So that would probably be great. I could definitely see that. Okay. Yeah, I mean, short of some of the weird stuff, because like if I go back to our clades, like things that we don't have that live here at all. We do have the catalyst venom dragons. We do have gliders. I think they're insectivore gliders. We don't have any spider dragons, but I'm not honestly sure if the Savanna is the best place for those. But we have like essentially the silk producing spider dragons. We wouldn't have our silk trawlers. We could have like the bola dragons, but I imagine those mostly being like on the cliff edges, although there is a lot of open space here. So like, I mean, it'd be hard for them to lay in wait and hide necessarily. And we could add the resin spitters. We could add some of those in the Savanna, although that's getting into the like, I imagine those being more in more tree areas and less in the Savanna. Just because I feel like it would make more sense. Like they'd have more structure to attach the resin homes to. They'd be a little bit less in the middle of everywhere. Also, that resin would be pretty fragile towards really large dragons. Like if they were moving through to mate in the open space. Like I think maybe that's okay that we don't have those. Are there a lot of coniferous trees here? In the Savanna, it's mostly just what are they called? The juniper trees. Those are conifers. But otherwise, not really. It's mostly some juniper trees, some cycads, but mostly it's going to be like our netophytes that are all of these guys on the ground. Yeah. Let me see if there's anything else big that we're missing. I mean, I feel like we kind of have most things sort of represented. We don't have any pescivores, but like the Savanna is not really the place to be putting our pescivores, so that's fine. So I think unless we wanted to try to get some of our spider dragons, like our silk producing dragons, which again, I kind of like trees, I feel like would make that easier unless they built like ground structures with the silk. But I struggle to see this being like kind of an ideal habitat for them. Because yeah, it would have to be like ground nests, or like they build traps for things that wander around. Like maybe I could see that. Potentially. Like, or they could use it to hunt, like the flying silk spitters. They fly around. It's easy to see. Do you have plans for a scorpion dragon? No, that's not something I've looked at. Like having like a big stinger. I mean, we do have like general like venom, like actual venomous dragons. Like that could be a thing. Like biting venomous dragons. I don't know if, because they have that big like thing, which I feel like if they're evolving from venomous fanged dragons, they'd be likely to just keep that, I would think. Let's add some. I'm just gonna add like a light note for like flying venomous kind of dude, still flighted, probably a carnivore, because I feel like we don't have a ton of carnivores. Description, maybe like hunt in family packs. You take down larger prey. Do we know anything about the venomous? Dragon fuzz, feathered wings. Probably still that. Probably still colorful. Fuzzy. Some feathers. Size. Let's see what size our other predators are right now. That one. So we have medium, medium, medium. So we have a lot of medium predators. One's an egg eater. Long distance. What? No, I must have looked at this wrong. Hold on. No, yeah, we have a medium, an extra, extra large, and a small. And our medium one, I think, is our egg eater. So we don't have anything that's really eating big prey other than our really large aerial predators. So it could make sense. They wouldn't need to be as big as the prey that they're eating if they like hunt together. So they could still be like dog sized or like house cat sized. And then they would just like, you know, swarm you a little bit. I think that makes sense. Call them swarmers. I don't know. It's fine. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Venomous bite. So these would probably be colorful. Colorful. Yeah, I think that tracks. Okay, so that pulls those in. But if we wanted to have spider dragons, how would we pull in our spider dragons? I mean, they could just like do the whole ground trap thing. I don't know. Maybe we hold off on those. I think that could be fine. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I feel like we've kind of gotten to a good place with the Savanna, because typically the way this works, right, is we do a biome, and then we're going to have to go back and fill things in at the end, but we're kind of going biome by biome to get an idea of what's going to be there, what kind of options we're going to have, and then we'll kind of fill in some of the more like general dragons that would then have families, I guess, in different pillar clusters and stuff like that. So I feel like that's kind of a good place to end this for today. If you want to keep following along, I will continue doing this every week for patrons. I'm sure at some point we'll do another public live stream for this, but it'll be, I don't know how often I'll do it. Not like super crazy often, because the whole point is that this is like a patron only thing. But this is going well, and I'm excited to draw some of these guys. I'm very excited. Which one is it? What was that really cute one? The ones that, like, this one. The, like, poisonous koala dudes. I'm really into those. I'm excited to doodle those. It's gonna be a lot of fun. But yeah, so thank you everyone for, yes, exactly, Mashiko, for hanging out and helping me with some spec bio. This was a lot of fun. I do enjoy, I don't know, I enjoy these ones because it's just a lot of like brainstorming and spitballing. This will be good. I guess the next thing on my channel is just going to continue to be the Monday conlanging streams. I don't think I have anything else scheduled right now. If you haven't checked out SpecCon, check out SpecCon coming in June in Ireland. There's a lot of links for that. Yeah, I'm glad you could make it too, Bib. It's fun. You're you know all the things, not literally all the things, but it's helpful having an experienced. Is there a word for that? Spec biologist, speculative biologist? I mean, like regular biologist too, but you know what I mean. It is helpful. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's all I have. I hope you all have a good weekend. And again, for anyone that is in the US South or East Coast, I hope that you're safe and I hope that you're prepared and that everything's fine and you do a great job and that it's just fun. So yeah, I will see you all later. Spec biogician, like a magician. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm ending the stream. Links are in the description, probably, if I remember.